the Second and Third Anglo-Powhatan Wars. In an earlier video, we discussed the First Anglo-Powhatan War and the Jamestown Massacre. This video serves as a sequel, focusing on the Second and Third Anglo-Powhatan Wars. If you haven't seen the first one, we recommend watching it for context. Aftermath of the Jamestown Massacre. The Powhatan attack on March 22, 1622, marked a devastating turning point for the Virginia colony. Over 300 colonists, nearly a third of the English population in the colony, were killed in the surprise assault. This act of aggression launched what would become the Second Anglo-Powhatan War, a decade-long conflict that irreparably altered relations between the Powhatan Confederacy and the English settlers. The attack dealt a severe blow to the Virginia colony, not only in terms of human loss, but also in economic and political stability. The colony had already struggled to generate profits for its investors, and now it faced widespread insecurity and loss of labor, including that of indentured servants critical to its survival. The Second Anglo-Powhatan War, 1622 to 1632. In the immediate aftermath of the 1622 massacre, English settlers abandoned many of their smaller, more vulnerable settlements. Survivors sought refuge in Jamestown and other fortified locations, regrouping to decide their next steps. The situation was so precarious that Governor George Wyatt relocated to the eastern shore for 6 weeks during the summer of 1622 to avoid further attacks. Rather than retaliate immediately, the English shifted their focus to diplomacy and strategy. They sought alliances with more distant indigenous groups along the Potomac River and the eastern shore, securing trade and building relationships that could be leveraged against the Powhatans. By late 1622 and early 1623, they began a campaign of targeted raids against isolated Powhatan villages, attacking during the fall and winter when the Powhatans were least prepared. This phase of the conflict evolved into a prolonged guerrilla war. Both sides employed ambushes, small-scale attacks, and scorched earth tactics. The English aimed to weaken the Powhatans through attrition, destroying crops and villages to destabilize their society. Meanwhile, the Powhatans resisted fiercely, using their intimate knowledge of the land to their advantage. The Second and Third Anglo-Powhatan Wars, continuing the struggle, guerrilla warfare, and the Poison Peace, 1622 to 1624. The Powhatans, skilled in guerrilla tactics, were adept at striking quickly and vanishing into the terrain. Their bows and arrows often outperformed the English muskets in speed and effectiveness, and their superior knowledge of the land enabled them to ambush the colonists with precision. In 1623, both sides agreed to meet under the guise of peace negotiations. However, the English used this opportunity to launch a brutal assault. During the meeting, they poisoned the drinks offered to the Powhatan leaders, killing many, and followed this treachery by slaughtering the delegation. This surprise attack left the Powhatans unprepared, and the English proceeded to burn villages and massacre natives across the region. The conflict escalated in 1624 when the Powhatans gathered an impressive force of 800 bowmen to defend their cornfields from the English. Despite their numbers, the Powhatans were outmatched in an open battle against the English. After destroying the fields, the English forced the bowmen to retreat, inflicting heavy casualties on the Powhatans. Only 16 Englishmen were wounded in the battle, highlighting the technological advantage of firearms over bows and arrows. Although a peace treaty was declared in 1628, skirmishes resumed in 1629 and continued until a more stable peace was reached in 1632. This marked the end of the Second Anglo-Powhatan War, but tensions remained high as the English expanded their settlements along the James and York Rivers. The Third Anglo-Powhatan War, 1644 to 1646. To secure their territory, the English constructed a wooden palisade in 1634, stretching 6 miles across the Virginia Peninsula. This stockade was intended to create a buffer between the colonists and the Powhatan Confederacy. By 1644, however, the English population had grown significantly, outnumbering the native peoples in the region. Despite his advanced age of around 90, Chief Opechancanough launched a final effort to drive the English from Powhatan lands. On April 18, 1644, the Powhatans broke through the palisade, killing 400 to 500 colonists in a devastating surprise raid. The attack mirrored the timing of the 1622 assault, strategically occurring when English food supplies were low. The Powhatans hoped this would disrupt the colonists' ability to retaliate effectively. Opechancano's strategy aimed to limit English expansion and perhaps achieve one last victory before his death. The timing also reflected his awareness of the English Civil War, which he may have seen as an opportunity to strike a weakened adversary. Additionally, younger Powhatan warriors, eager to prove themselves, likely supported this aggressive move. However, the Powhatans did not follow up with additional large-scale attacks, and the English quickly retaliated. In February 1645, the Virginia colony ordered the construction of 3 new frontier forts: Fort Charles on the James River, Fort James on the Chickahominy River, and Fort Royal on the York River. By July, the English launched a counteroffensive, attacking native villages and seizing resources with the help of allied tribes such as the Rappahannock and Accomack. In August, the English attacked Opechancano's stronghold, capturing him and many of his followers. Opechancano was taken to Jamestown, where he was later shot and killed in 1646. His death marked the end of the Third Anglo-Powhatan War. The Treaty of 1646. In March 1646, the English established another fort, Fort Henry, at the location of modern-day Petersburg. Later that year, a peace treaty was signed between Governor William Berkeley and Opechancano's successor, Necatoans. The treaty formalized the removal of the Powhatan Confederacy to land north of the York River, effectively restricting their territory and sovereignty. This marked the conclusion of the Anglo-Powhatan conflicts, solidifying English dominance in the region and paving the way for further colonial expansion. The Treaty of 1646 and the dissolution of the Powhatan Confederacy. The Treaty of 1646 marked the formal dissolution of the Powhatan Confederacy. It transferred most of the Confederacy's remaining lands to the English colonists, effectively ending native sovereignty in the region. Although Necatoans retained the title of chief, his position was nominal. By this time, the native population of the Powhatan Confederacy had been devastated. Many had succumbed to disease, died in violent conflicts, been enslaved and sent to the West Indies, or fled to join other tribes in surrounding regions. Following Necatoans' death, his successor, Totopotomoy, became the leader of only 2 remaining Powhatan tribes. After his death, his wife, Kakakoesk, succeeded him, but she ruled over just the Pamunkey tribe, symbolizing the near-total collapse of what had once been a powerful confederacy.